Alright, so I have 4 more weeks here teaching English in Thailand. And today I want to take a little time out to reflect on my experience so far. I wanted to discuss 5 things that I enjoyed during this experience this past close to a year, and 3 things that I didn't like so much. So, of the 5 things that I liked, first point that I did like was I feel the students here tend to be very friendly. Whenever, for example, whenever I pass them in the halls, they would say hello to me or say good afternoon, hello, Mr. Kingston, what have you. Even the students that aren't I don't teach, such as the 10th, 11th, and 12th graders, they would say hello to me. And those that don't, oftentimes, it's because they're shy, which is fine. I was the same way when I was a student. On the flip side, though, I feel students want they're inside of the classroom. They don't tend to be the most studious. They come off as they don't really care about their academic performance, kind of lazy, which I can't really pin on the students. I think it's part of the culture. One example would be, you can see it by the number of holidays that there are in Thailand. I believe it was described by a Thai man that I talked to a while back. Said that Thais tend to be in Thai it's called subai subai, which means very relaxed about their studies and their work life, I think, as well after that. Which it makes it challenging as a student to try to get them motivated, which I can take as a point to learn how to push people to do things that I want. At the same time, I'd still prefer students to value my time, value me moving from another country to theirs to teach them. Right, so that's the first con. And the second point that I did like about teaching here was the teaching hours. So right now I have 24 teaching hours in 15-minute periods spread out through 5 working days, which I feel is not too much where I feel overwhelmed. It's not too little either where I feel like I'm only doing this part-time. I feel like it's the perfect balance where I can see myself as an English teacher in Thai society. That has been my place here in Thailand for the better part of a year. And besides that, so another thing that I did like teaching, besides the teaching hours, was I think the Thai teachers here, they tend to value their foreign teachers. Despite my age and inexperience being first-time teacher, I feel like they really respected me and they valued that I moved all the way out here to educate their youth. And when I had problems with certain groups or certain students, they would go out of their way to try to help me resolve the issue. For example, they drag their students into meetings, scold them, telling them they need to respect their teachers, so on and so forth. So that part of the Thai system I did like. That is pro number 3. And the second point that I did not like so much was I feel like there was a lack of autonomy on what I was allowed to and not allowed to do, ranging from the teaching methods I could employ as well as my overall behavior. A few quick examples. I was not allowed to film my lectures. I've had a lot of criticism about me using a water gun in my classes. Outside of the classroom, I was not allowed to sit down on the lawn where I feel like I'm the most productive when I'm preparing lessons or doing whatever during times outside of the classroom. So those things were prohibited, saying that it was not what a teacher is supposed to do here. I feel is very constraining for me. It limits my creativity, and I feel like I was constantly told what I could and could not do. I lacked that autonomy to teach in a way which I feel was most effective. And at the same time, I see the system and the students that it produces, they are the best students, as I've said previously. They're not the best, and the teachers as well, they aren't always the most qualified. Quick example, the Thai teacher that teaches English, she's a very nice lady, but her English is not the best to say, and some of the students, they can see that their own English is better than the teachers. And it doesn't really make sense for me how a teacher can be less knowledgeable in a subject and still be teaching students. And in addition to that, I feel like I can't really blame the students how they can feel not very motivated when they know more than the teacher. And this compounds on the fact that in Thailand there is a no-fail system, where I think the age of my students being teenagers, they've caught on where they can do whatever, they can fail other tests, they'll still get passed along to the next grade, which doesn't really provide any motivation for them to work hard in their academic studies. Right, so the fourth point of things that I did like here. So one thing I did like was I felt I was privileged to have the opportunity to work on my public speaking skills. I was allowed to take the floor in front of 10, 15, sometimes even 20 students and present myself as an expert in a subject matter and work on how to manage a classroom, how to speak in front of others with confidence, which is something that I've always lacked up until this point when I made this big move to Thailand. So I want to make that point. I'm very grateful for having this opportunity to develop myself personally. Right, and moving on, the third point that I did not like here, teaching in Thailand. So I feel like my students, they lacked maturity. Even when they are so-called in the 7th grade, they're 12, 13 years old. Even now at the end of the school year, when they will be moving on to the 8th grade, for example, they lack maturity. And they seem more like elementary students sometimes to me than they would be middle or high school students, which it makes it mentally tiring for me. I don't really have the patience to deal with young children at this point of my life. But beyond that, my time here teaching students, I wanted to teach them more than my native tongue, English. I wanted to show them more than how to speak, how to write. I wanted to pass on knowledge that I've gained so far in my 23, 24 years of life. I think it could be seen from me trying to teach them key moments in history, such as the Khmer Rouge or the Vietnam War, as well as what I've learned about personal finance, how to manage your money, and also the life lessons that I've learned so far in my life. I wanted to share that with students, but they lack the maturity and the interest to, I feel, take it seriously. Of course, perhaps the method in which I tried to teach it, it wasn't suited for this age range, and I failed in that way. I have to take responsibility for that. Of course, I think all the foreign teachers can, well, at least most of them can agree that students here, they're not the best, and I feel like a lot of them have lowered their standards in order to accommodate for that. And me, I'm not willing to lower my standards, not for anyone. I like to set the bar high, and I feel others will follow suit. And At this point of teaching this part of school year, I don't think these students can be my students anymore. I'll finish off the 4 weeks, but after that, most of them anyways, they cannot be my students. They're friendly. Perhaps if they were 5 or 6 years older, they could be my associates that I see and greet whenever I see them. But besides that, as a teacher-student relationship, it's just not going to work out. All right, so the last point, the point number 5 of things, the last point of what I liked about teaching here in Thailand was the age diversity. I've had to deal with students that are 11 years old and they cry over every little thing. I've had to learn how to manage that, essentially how to deal with small children, it feels like, as well as up to the age of 15, where students would take advantage of any sign of weakness. I had to learn how to, I can't just use harsh measures, I had to work with their mind, learn how to reason with them and make them see why my point is the better point. Of course, everything in between as well, from the 12, 13, and 14-year-olds. This is, I feel, the most challenging age group to teach when their lives are confusing and they're trying to figure out who they are. At this point, I feel most people have behavioral problems, and I was on the front lines on how to deal and engage with that, how to manage the problems that these students have in the classroom, which is part of life, I suppose. So I think that's all I have to say. That has been my experience here in Thailand, and in these next 4 weeks, if there are any changes or updates, I will let you know.